Imagine for a moment that this coconut is your body. This is your body after a springlock failure. You might want to avoid this if you ever find yourself inside one of these springlock suits. Let's talk about how that can be achieved. So first, let's begin with a very brief summary of what exactly springlock suits are and what a springlock failure is. So, once upon a time, there were two men, William Afton and Henry Emily. Henry was a brilliant engineer, and William, like any normal person who happens to be a psychopath, liked to murder children. Anyways, these two men partnered up and created Fredbear's Family Diner, which was a diner that mainly catered towards children. This diner also had two mascot animatronics that could be programmed to do certain things on stage. The children, of course, loved these animatronics, which were called Spring Bonnie and Fredbear, by the way. So anyways, the diner needed both wearable suits and animatronic versions of both Fredbear and Spring Bonnie. And to achieve this, while also saving cost and space, William and Henry decided to make animatronics that can also be used as wearable suits. And so, to accomplish this, a spring-lock mechanism was used, which allowed Spring Bonnie and Fredbear to be used as both independent animatronics and also as wearable suits. And as for how one can use the spring-lock mechanism to make the animatronic go from animatronic to wearable suit mode, well, to do that, the spring locks inside the suits had to be wound up, so that the animatronic section of the suit would move to the sides, thereby creating just enough space for a person to get into one of these animatronics and to use them as a costume basically. So that's all great and everything, but the problem comes from the fact that when these springs are wound up to convert these animatronics into suits, the springs were placed under extreme tension. So much so that if one of these springs were to get loose, they'd come off with enough force to tear through skin and bone, which is what most people are made of. So essentially, the cost of this cost-saving strategy often came at the cost of human lives. But anyways, now let's talk about how one could save themselves if they ever get caught in a spring-lock situation. So there are some training tips available on how to properly use one of these spring-lock suits, and also included in these training tips are what one can do to save themselves in the event of a spring-lock failure. These safety measures might seem impractical or not useful, but that might not be the case because apparently William Afton, one of the founders of Fredbear's Family Diner, actually talks about an incident where he managed to survive a spring-lock failure, albeit with some severe injuries. It's not detailed how exactly William managed this, but the fact that he did survive could imply that some of these safety measures can work. Anyways, let's go over these safety guidelines. So, safety guideline number 1, don't panic. So, not panicking while a spring-lock fails and pierces your skin and bone might be hard, but if you were to somehow bite down the pain and not panic, that could save you. The reason for this is, first of all, not all spring locks would go off at once, but what usually happens is that when one spring lock goes off and causes unbearable pain, people would naturally panic, which would in turn cause them to make frantic, sudden movement, which is a problem because one of the causes of a spring lock failure is frantic, sudden movements. So if one manages to not panic and avoid such erratic movements, they'll prevent more spring locks from going off. Safety guideline number 2, do not move. So this guideline is basically an extension of what we just talked about in guideline number 1, aka rapid movement can cause more spring locks to fail, so it should be avoided if possible. Safety guideline number 3, call for help. So if you manage to somehow stay calm and collected after a spring lock or two has failed, that would mean that you have a very high pain tolerance, which would maybe allow you to go over some of the text that you sent 10 years ago, and also to call someone for help before your body gets crushed. However, if the 1 or 2 spring locks that went off happen to be around your neck, that would probably sever your vocal cords, and you won't be able to make a lot of noise without them. Safety guideline number 4, calm your breathing. So this guideline is important because one of the other reasons why spring locks can fail is due to them getting in contact with moisture. And apparently for these spring locks to fail, it doesn't even take that much moisture. Apparently some sweat or some moisture from heavy breathing, if it were to get to the spring locks, would cause them to fail. So not panicking, as it says in guideline number 1, and calming your breathing are key to survival. However, that being said, if the spring locks had been off around your torso, that would puncture your lungs, causing you to drown in your own blood basically. But on the bright side, that would allow you to control your breathing, involuntarily of course. Safety guideline number 5, have a coworker wind up the springs. So if you somehow manage to follow all previous guidelines, you could call someone for help, and they could wind up the springs that came loose, saving you. Let's just hope that while doing this, His co-worker doesn't lose their grip on the hand crank tool that is used to wind up the springs, because if that happens, the spring locks would again come crashing down on you, which would be unpleasant. And finally, safety guideline number 6. Carefully remove the suit. Now, if all previous guidelines were followed, you'll be able to remove the suit and get some medical care. But bear in mind that the cost of this medical care might be deducted from your salary, and that's because Fazbear Entertainment doesn't really put that much of a priority on employee safety. And in case you don't believe me, I will now go over the more practical advice that they provide on how to deal with a spring lock failure. Take a listen. Try not to nudge or press against any of the spring locks inside the suit. Do not touch the spring locks at any time. Do not breathe on the spring locks, as any moisture may loosen them and cause them to break loose. In the case of the spring locks coming loose while you are wearing the suit, please try to maneuver away from populated areas before bleeding out, as to not ruin the customer's experience with all your bleeding. So that is how little Fazbear Entertainment, or Fredbear's Family Diner, cares for its employees. But hey, at least they do care about their customers. So ultimately, since the chances of anyone actually being able to follow those safety guidelines are super low, let's assume that like most people who get caught in a spring lock failure, you too are able to do absolutely nothing about it. And in that case, let's go over what exactly will happen to you according to William Afton himself. So the following is what William had to say about getting caught and dying in a spring lock failure. It's pretty gruesome. Anyways, here goes. If you trigger the spring locks, 2 things will happen. First, the locks themselves will snap right into you, making deep cuts all over your body. And a split second later, all the animatronic parts, all that sharp steel and hard plastic, will instantly be driven into your body. You will die, but it will be slow. You'll feel your organs punctured, the suit will grow wet with your blood, and you will know you're dying for long minutes. You'll try to scream, but you will be unable to. Your vocal cords will be severed, and your lungs will fill with your own blood until you drown in it. So that right there is what usually happens in the event of a spring lock failure. Oh, and also, before you leave, even though moisture and sudden movements can trigger a spring lock failure, there are some other factors that also contribute to the chances of a spring lock failure going up. And these factors are that the spring lock suits, like any other form of machinery, needs to be maintained properly and repaired on occasion. And if proper maintenance is not done, a spring lock failure can happen a lot easier. Which is actually what happened to William Afton. He put on a Spring Bonnie suit that was just lying in some back room somewhere, and as why William did that, well, he was trying to scare away some ghosts. More on that in a future video. But anyways, William put on the suit, which hadn't been maintained, then a drop of water fell into the suit, causing a spring lock failure, and the end of William Afton, which you can see in one of the Five Nights at Freddy's mini-games. So in conclusion, it is possible to escape a spring lock failure, and it's also possible to win the lottery, so get yourself a lottery and make your way over to Fredbear's Family Diner, I guess. I'm ending this video. Goodbye, and have a good day, I guess.